welcome to worship. We're so glad to be able to join with you in worship again this week. And we're going to be thinking about Moses again.
Yes.
We're going to think about being in the desert, and we're going to think about Moses hitting that stone and that water coming forth, don't we?
Do you ever feel like hitting a rock?
Not really, because I assume that I'll end up being more hurt than the rock.
Yeah.
So I can't say I ever feel an urge to hit a rock. But yes, he hit the rock with the stick, not himself.
Yes.
And the water came forth. We've got a watery call to worship today. A drop of water, insignificant in isolation. When dropped in a pool, the ripples move over into infinity. The water is changed by one drop of water. A drop is filling now into the pool of our spirit. The water begins to ripple. Holy God, as we consider the magnitude of a drop of water to touch and change the pool, may we hear the power of your touch in our lives, the potential for our lives to touch others. Amen.
Amen.
We're going to sing our first song, and the chorus says, showers of blessing are coming, mercy drops round us are falling, but for the showers we plead.
Oh, one of my favourites.
You're just saying that, aren't you?
No, I do like it.
Let's sing together then. Now, I heard an interesting story this week about a young man who called the pastor of a local church, the church just on the corner from the road that he lived on. And they were requesting if he would come and he would pray for his ill mother, who wasn't doing very well. Now, the pastor knew that actually they attended another church. They didn't go to his church. So he said to the young man, he said, well, shouldn't you call the pastor of your church and ask him to come and pray for your mother? And the young man replied, yeah, but we don't want to take the chance that he might catch whatever it is that Mum has. Today, as we're thinking of this story, we're going to reflect on what it teaches us about prayer.
Yeah.
And learning to pray. And just now we're going to pause for a moment and have a prayer together.
Mm-hmm.
Father God, so often it can be hard to know what to say when we pray. However, we take comfort that you just enjoy us coming into your presence, even if we're not sure what to say. As we come into worship, may we do so seeking to listen more than we talk, and seeking to be changed more than we seek to change. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Now you're going to introduce our next song?
Yes, we're going to sing another song that reminds us of who God is, because I think when you're talking to somebody, you ought to know who they are, really. Don't know if you ever have that thing where you meet somebody and you can't remember what their name is, or you know you've met them before, or they recognise you.
Yes, and you have
no idea who they are.
Yeah.
So it's important when we approach God in prayer that we remember exactly who he is. And this is what this song says. It says, above all powers, above all kings, above all nature and all created things, above all wisdom and all the ways of man, you were here before the world began. And we're going to sing this through now, just declaring who it is our God is.
Above all powers, above all kings, above all nature and all created things, above all wisdom and all the ways of man, you were here before the world began. Above all kingdoms, above all thrones, above all wonders the world has ever known, above all wealth and treasures of the earth, there's no way to measure what you're worth. Rejected and alone, like a rose trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all, above all powers, above all kings, above all nature and all created things, above all wisdom and all the ways of man, you were here before the world began. Above all kingdoms, above all thrones, above all wonders the world has ever known, above all wealth and treasures of the earth, there's no way to measure what you're worth. Crucified, lay behind the stone, you live to die, rejected and alone, like a rose trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all. Crucified, lay behind the stone, you live to die, rejected and alone, like a rose trampled on the ground.
welcome to the fourth of our films for this year's Self-Denial Appeal. This week I'll be talking to Melinda Boone in the Philippines territory. Melinda is now based at divisional headquarters, but she's worked in anti-human trafficking and modern slavery for the best part of a decade. She features in the Salvation Army's Helping Hand Appeal films from last year. While self-denial money doesn't directly support anti-human trafficking work, it does help fund some of the infrastructure that makes it possible. That means people like Melinda can visit groups, including CORE, so that people are more aware of the risks to themselves, their children and their wider family. And the risks are very real. When wages are low and jobs are scarce, the offer of good money for working abroad is difficult to resist. The reality is often forced labour and exploitation. Her team also supports survivors of trafficking as they return home and reintegrate with their families. Sounds to me like Melinda's got a lot on her plate, but it turns out that's not all she does. Hi Major Melinda, can you hear us?
Yeah, hello, how are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks. How are you? And where are you?
I'm here in General Santos City, that is somewhere in South Cotabato, in the province of South Cotabato in the Philippines. So I am here, the Divisional Secretary for Program and Youth in Mindanao Island Division, Philippine Territory.
Wow, that is a really long title. I hope you can get that on a badge somehow. So, can you tell me a bit about what your role involves?
Yeah, so as a Divisional Secretary for Program, I am the overseer of the core program in the division as well as in the youth department. And I have also an additional role as the national contact person for modern slavery and human trafficking. So that is another challenging role.
2020 has been a big year for our world. What's it been like on your side of the planet in Philippines?
Yes, the COVID-19 pandemic really brings dramatic change in the way we used to it. Like, for example, in the core, especially here in Mindanao, because not all of our comrades have internet connections. And we only use Messenger, just for text. We don't have face-to-face worship, especially for youth activities, because 18 below are not allowed to go out in their homes.
Okay. People under the age of 18 are not allowed out of their homes. Is that what you said?
Yeah, below 18, they should stay at home from March until now. That is one of the government restrictions. So we have also what we call now Sunday lockdown. So nobody is allowed to go out every Sunday. So meaning to say we don't have worship on Sunday, but we rely on online house worship. But this December, we start now the face-to-face with 50% of the congregation can attend.
Well, that's good that things might be easing. What's the impact of the coronavirus pandemic been on modern slavery and human trafficking?
Yeah, our Department of Justice have recorded almost threefold cases, especially on online sexual exploitation of children. So our cases really has a dramatic rise up. So we are right now there is an ongoing online awareness campaign about online sexual exploitations to protect the family, our children. So most of their time are on internet.
Yeah. So it's great to see the Philippines really spearheading the Army's response to this in your part of the world. What does resilience mean to you in these days?
Yeah, we Filipinos are really resilient people. Just recently, we have this Typhoon Ulysses that damages a lot of regions, especially in national capital regions, where there are a lot of floods. And really, it is so hard, but we have this smiling spirit that we can still smile amidst of storms, amidst of many troubles that is happening surrounds us.
That's really encouraging to us. What would you say the things that you're learning about yourself and life because of the coronavirus pandemic?
We learn a lot. When I was in my core, in that little core, I have a lot of vegetables garden at the back. So every Monday, I go around with my comrades and bring them some vegetables. And our neighbors who are also struggling for their daily needs, so they will also knock to my door and said, "Oh, Major, can I have this? Can I ask for your papaya, for your other vegetables? Because we need to survive." And that is really, I am thankful for that opportunity, to extend help and also to show practical love to my people, because we are also challenged, but still we cannot stop helping others.
Yeah. So we're just really grateful that we could have this time together all the way from London to the Philippines. Yeah, God bless you and God bless the Philippines territory.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is an opportunity and I'm so happy to be part of what you're also doing. God bless you, Captain Ben. Thank you too.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
In next week's film, I'll be making a call to Pakistan and talking to Fozia Columbus.
The Bible reading is taken this week from the book of Exodus, Exodus chapter 17. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, travelling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarrelled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and our livestock die of thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." The Lord answered Moses, "Go out in front of the people. Take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink." So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel, and he called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarrelled and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" The Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, "Choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands." So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered, and Moses, Aaron and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side and one on the other, so that his hands remained steady till sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this on a scroll as something to be remembered, and make sure that Joshua hears it, because I will completely blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven." Moses built an altar and called it, "The Lord is my banner." He said, "Because hands were lifted up to the throne of the Lord will be at war against the Amalekites from generation to generation."
And now we're going to come into a time of prayer. I remember when I was young, I don't know about you, did your parents teach you a prayer to say when you went to
I
bed?
can't remember.
Well, my parents taught me a simple prayer, and my brother and my sister, to pray when we went to bed. And the prayer is this: "Gentle Jesus, meek and mild, look upon this little child. Pity my simplicity, suffer me to come to thee." Now, at the time, I really didn't know what the prayer meant, but I knew it was important. It gave me words and started me down a path of praying to God. Praying to God is not always simple. As we said before, sometimes we're just not sure what to pray, but we know we want to pray. We're not sure how to pray. We're not sure what's right and what's wrong, what's okay and what's not okay. And sometimes you might think, well, wouldn't it be great if God had just given us a prayer like that simple prayer I learned as a child that would just cover everything? But the truth is, he did, didn't he? Jesus gives us a prayer, and we call it the Lord's Prayer today, and we're just going to use this as we enter into our time of prayer. It guides us through some important things to pray about. When we come to the Lord's Prayer, we read, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name." This reminds us to start prayer by both recognizing who God is and affording him the honor and the glory that goes along with who he is. Just now, pause and just give God the glory and the honor of your praise and heart in these quiet moments. Jesus goes on to say, "Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Having given God his honor, given him his place, in doing so, we recognize that actually his will and his purposes are higher than our own. Just now in the quiet, come before him, not seeking to get him to go with your agenda, but opening yourself to his. Give us today our daily bread. We move from adoration and submission to provision. Jesus reminds us in this prayer that God is the source of all we need. Just now, let's ask the Lord for our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Today, we often overlook the need to regularly come before the Lord and confess in the quiet. Let's seek forgiveness anew and ask that we might have the will to forgive those who've hurt us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Just now ask for God's protection and guidance in dealing with the spiritual realities that you face now. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Having started with praise and adoration, we finish in the same way. Now we're going to hear the word from Rebecca.
I heard on the radio once that 80% of all headaches are actually caused by dehydration. And that consequently, before we reach for the paracetamol, we ought to have a glass of water. Now, I also read another time when I was trying to lose weight that actually some of the times when we think we're hungry, we're actually thirsty. But instead of drinking, we eat because we think we're hungry, when actually the problem is completely different. So actually, I think it's a bit mystifying, isn't it? That you can be thirsty, you can be dehydrated, and not actually realise it. How can that be? That we're thirsty, and yet we don't know? Well, I actually have a theory about this. I think it's because we live in Britain, and Britain is an island. So we are surrounded by water. And more than that, it's a damp island. We live in a place where there's no shortage of rain. And I think that when you live on a damp island, it's very difficult to believe that the problem you may have is that you are lacking water. Nevertheless, in fact, very often, it's true. Now, one good thing about entering a desert, of course, is that thirst is easier to recognise for what it is. And if we liken this to our prayer lives, we could say that many times, actually, what we're thirsty for is God's presence. But we just don't realise it. It's only when we enter the desert that we recognise our need for Him. So continuing on with our Lent theme this week, it's only when we enter the desert that we realise how thirsty we are. And during this time of Lent, we have the chance to put aside some of the things that distract us, some of the things that keep us from prayer, as we realise how much it is that we need God's presence. Now, one of the critical lessons that the people of Israel had to learn in the desert was about the importance of prayer and about the power of prayer. Now, chapter 17 in the book of Exodus shows us two separate instances where the people of Israel find themselves in trouble. One is a problem that is caused by the natural world, there is a lack of water, and one is a problem that's caused by other people. They become under attack from the Amalekites. And the problem with both these instances was that the people of Israel were not prepared to face any kind of problem. They were definitely not ready for war, even though they were dressed up for battle. And they were not ready to endure hardship. And part of the reason that they weren't ready to deal with these problems was that they expected their lives to be trouble-free. They expected that once they had got their freedom from slavery in Egypt, that everything would just go along swimmingly, that there would be no challenges, no problems, no trouble to face. And a very key phrase comes in verse 8 when they say, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Now, at this point, they'd witnessed several miracles. They'd been taken through the Red Sea on dry ground. They had the symbol of the Lord's presence in the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. They'd been given manna and quail to eat every day. Yet as soon as they encountered another problem, they started to doubt that God was with them. And that can be a bit like us in our lives as Christians. Sometimes we expect life, especially in the West, to be trouble-free, so that when trouble comes, our faith is suddenly wavering. Now, expecting a trouble-free life is a real hindrance to prayer. The fact is, we live in a fallen world. Trouble will come in some form or another to all of us. And the pandemic is proof of that. It's hit everybody. Jesus himself said to his disciples, "In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, because I have overcome the world." Learning to pray is about learning what to do when trouble comes. It's not only about that, but one of the factors about prayer is in learning what to do when trouble comes, as it always will. Trouble will always come. Now, in the first situation that they faced, the one with the lack of water, we see a great example of what not to do when trouble comes. It seems like the Israelites, they've learnt nothing from the Red Sea and the manna and the quail, and they make the same mistakes all over again. Instead of talking to God about the problem, instead, they turn on Moses. And I think this is because they don't really know God. I remember when I first became a Christian, I remember thinking, well, the Bible tells me that I need to love God. But I don't really know God. I've only just become a Christian. How can I love someone that I don't really know? And I remember at that moment, the words of that chorus, that Salvation Army chorus, came back to me as a prayer. Teach me how to love thee. Teach me how to pray. And I had to pray that for myself because I didn't know how to pray and I didn't know how to love God because I didn't really know him. And I had to be honest about that and ask him to help me. The people of Israel, they don't really know God because they're at the very beginning of their relationship with him. However, they do know Moses. So instead of talking to God, they talk to Moses. But they do what people always do when they're spiritually immature. They turn on their leaders. They blame Moses for a problem that is not at all his fault. They say, this is all your fault because you led us out of Egypt, because you led us out of slavery. And Egypt is calling them again. It's got its hooks into them. It's calling them. Let's go back to Egypt and reject the leadership of the guy who's trying to lead us into something better. Now, don't get me wrong. Leaders are not infallible. They do make mistakes and they do need to be held to account. But this problem is not the fault of Moses. However, Moses responds to their grumbling by doing what leaders often do when they're under attack. He begins to reject the people that God has called him to lead. He says to God, what am I to do with these people? These people. Not my people, not God's people, but these people. I'm not with these people. And both the reaction of the people and the reaction of their leader makes a bad situation worse. In this life, you will have trouble. Trouble comes and the people forget all about what God has done for them in the past. They doubt him, they complain, they grumble, they turn on their leader and their leader in turn rejects them. All because they've forgotten who it is that they really should be taking their troubles to in the first place. They seem to have forgotten all about God. It's a bit like the people who have a chronic headache, a cracking headache, and forget that maybe they need to drink some water. I think that the really sad thing for me is that this is a problem that the whole community is facing. It's a shared problem, it's a common problem, but their response to it is to turn on each other and become divided. And that only always makes the problem worse. Now, again, one of the things that we've had to learn during this season that we've gone through is that we are all in this together. Not every situation is the same, but we're all facing the same problem of coronavirus. And if we turn on each other, if we don't work together, we're going to make a bad situation worse. And even the nations have to put aside their old differences and work together in the middle of this trouble that we're facing. Fortunately for Moses and the people of Israel, God is not ready to reject them, even though they seem to have forgotten all about him. He instructs Moses to take the elders of the community with him. They're, if you like, the people's representatives, their leaders. And he's going to take them with him to witness this miracle of the water from the rock. God reminds them once again who it is that they should be talking to, who it is who really has the power to meet their needs. Moses is instructed to take with him the staff that he used when the Red Sea parted. And this serves to remind them who God is and what he has done before for them. But something really interesting happens with that staff. After Moses strikes the rock and the water comes out, he starts referring to it as the staff of God. When he holds it over the sea, if you read that account in Exodus, it's called Moses' staff. After the water from the rock, it's called God's staff. And that is a small detail, but actually it's significant because it shows a change in Moses' own understanding. The staff is now God's staff. These people are God's people. God is the real leader and not Moses. And most importantly of all, their problems are God's problems. And when we come to God in prayer, we need to remember that prayer changes, first of all, our perception. God lives within us through the power of his Holy Spirit. And that means that our lives are also his life. Our children, our families are also his children, his families. Our work is his work, and our problems are his problems. And when we remember that, and when we remember exactly who God is, the God who rescues us from slavery, the God who parts the Red Sea, the God who provides for all our needs, that makes all the difference in prayer. It makes all the difference when Egypt starts calling us again and says, you were better off before. The desert is definitely not trouble-free, because soon as the problem with the water is solved, the people face a new threat. And this time the trouble is not natural, it's man-made. The Amalekites have decided to attack them. Now this is altogether a different kind of problem. And when problems are a different kind of problem, sometimes we get confused about what it is we ought to be doing. The people have never faced battle before. They're not ready for battle. They're a ragtag group. They've got children, they've got elderly people, they've got vulnerable people with them. It's not army against army. It's an army of Amalekites against a big group of civilians. And they're not living in towns or fortresses. They're living in tents. So the thing about this attack is that the people of Israel are extremely vulnerable. They're sitting ducks. They have no experience in battle. And from my perspective, I think that this attack on them is actually completely unnecessary. Because at this point, they're no threat to anybody. They're living a nomadic life as refugees in the desert. And yet somehow trouble finds them again. Sometimes trouble does come when we're vulnerable, when we're weak, when we're not ready for it. Sometimes we find ourselves under attack as believers, and we don't know why. And when the game changes and the problem comes from a different source, it's easy to forget all that you've learned before about the Lord. But something has changed in Moses. The staff is not his staff anymore. It is God's staff. The people are not these people anymore. They are God's people. And this problem is not just their problem. It's God's problem. So Moses, in full view of the people, climbs the hill, staff in hand, and immediately begins to pray. He raises his hand, he raises the staff with his hands above his head over the battlefield in prayer. Their God is not just a God who can deal with natural disasters. He's not just another God of agriculture who provides food and water. He is the Lord who can deal with whatever trouble comes their way. And as long as Moses is praying, they're winning the battle. As soon as he stops praying, they start losing again. And here is where the community comes in. Because Moses gets tired. He's only human. So the community steps in to support their leader. This is where it's different this time around. They hold up his arms when he can't hold them up anymore. Here is the thing about prayer that is wonderful. We don't have to go it alone. And perhaps we were never meant to. There are times for all of us when our prayer life is as dry and dusty as the desert, when we're finding it difficult to persevere in prayer, when we feel under attack and the words just won't come, when we're losing the battle. And it's okay during those times to ask the community of prayer to support you. An officer friend of mine lost a baby shortly after her and her husband were commissioned. And the experience was a really traumatic one for her. And I remember her telling me that for 6 months she couldn't pray. Now that's very difficult when you're a Salvation Army officer and you're a spiritual leader and you can't pray yourself. But she was honest enough and brave enough to approach friends of hers and say, I need you to pray for me. I need you to do my praying for me, because right now the words just won't come. And that is what she did for 6 months. People held up her hands because she was only human. When all her strength had left her, the community of prayer carried her through. And here in this instance, we see the opposite of what went before. We see that they really have learned something. During the first problem, they forgot all about God and turned on each other. But during the second problem, they started praying immediately, and they united around their leader and supported him in prayer when he was struggling to go on. The truth is that desert times will either make you or they will break you, depending on how you choose to respond, depending on what you choose to do when trouble comes. So we've got some announcements for this week.
Favourite part of the service.
We'd like to ask you to keep praying for John and Andrew Dinsmore. We did find out, unfortunately, that Christine Dinsmore has also passed away. So we want you to keep praying for both the boys. That's a lot of loss for them to deal with in a short space of time.
Yeah.
Keep them in your prayers. We've also had news this week that Majors Cornelis and Kobe are going back to the Netherlands.
Oh,
So
we're going to miss you.
We're going to miss them. We're going to miss you very much. You've really blessed us while you've had your time at Catford. We've only had you for a short while, but you've been a big blessing to us. But they're going to be corps officers in Vlaardingen Corps. Okay, hopefully
which is
right.
where Cornelius apparently was born, not in the corps itself.
Yes, but he grew
town.
up in that area. So it's going to be like returning home for him.
Yeah.
So we need to pray God's blessing on them as a congregation. We know they're going to do well because they've blessed us while they've been here. Now, next week on the 14th, of course, is Mothering Sunday. And the week after that, on Sunday the 21st, that will be the Self-Denial Altar Service. We will be sending out the envelopes so that you've got a chance to think about it and reflect about it. And if you need us to come and collect the envelopes, or if you want to sort out a different system, that's fine. Just let us know what you want to do. And the other thing is a reminder about the prayer meeting on Thursday evening. If you've got any prayer requests, and there are lots of things to pray about, please let us know and we will pray about them on Thursday evening as we meet together on Zoom. And now we're going to sing our final song. So we're going to sing this. It's a newer song. We're going to enjoy it together. And maybe...
Is an awesome God, He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God.
And now a word of benediction. May the God who drew the water from the rock nourish and enrich your spirit with every spiritual blessing. And may this blessing make you a blessing of God's grace to others. Amen.
Amen.